Stephanie White does a interview with a radio down there in Indiana. Pretty good interview.
This is going to be the loudest wake-up call in professional women's basketball history. It all revolves on a brutal behind-the-scenes power grab that no one anticipated. Petty jealousy, acrimonious rivalries, and an old guard desperately attempting to minimize the phenomena that swept the sports world dominated the league's story for months. However, the entire screenplay changed in an instant as the season came to a conclusion. In order to profit from the enormous financial title, the executives, seasoned coaches, and media talking heads who spent the summer telling fans to calm down are now trampling on each other. At the center of this complete storm is an explosive truth bomb that was just dropped by none other than Stephen A. Smith. He didn't hold back, confirming what ardent supporters have been murmuring for weeks about the league's higher management's blatant hypocrisy. He revealed a startling truth about Stephanie White, the front office of the Indiana Fever, and a whole organization that is utterly disconnected from its own audience. The desperate attempt to capitalize on the Caitlin Clark effect has officially gone out of control, and the current boardroom strategies will leave you dumbfounded. However, we must go back in time and see the blood that was just spilt in the Fever's own locker room in order to fully comprehend the scope of this hijacking. Christy Side's abrupt and ruthlessly harsh dismissal set off the complete earthquake that shook the basketball world. Imagine leading a team that had been in the complete wilderness for almost 10 years through a turbulent, stressful season and making it back to the playoffs, only to be dismissed before the dust had even settled. Despite her early season difficulties, Sides had at last begun to learn how to use the best offensive tool the college game had ever produced. After years of utter suffering, the team was clicking, the chemistry was growing, and the fan base was at last experiencing winning basketball. The Fever were playing some of the most thrilling basketball in the nation during the post-Olympic break, turning into a real offensive powerhouse that worried seasoned teams. However, the front staff didn't give a damn about advancement, loyalty, or the enormous amount of sweat equity teams had invested in the most closely watched rookie season in sports history. The executives realized they were sitting on a billion-dollar goldmine as soon as the Connecticut Sun eradicated the Fever, and they quickly concluded that a blue-collar, slogging coach was just not glamorous enough for the bright lights. They required a household name, someone who could command attention from a generation of talented people while standing at the platform and projecting an air of mastery. The decision to fire Sides was a well-thought-out, emotionless business move that indicated the Fever had evolved from a basketball team to a multinational corporate brand. However, what transpired next behind closed doors completely alters the narrative. Halfway across the nation, a highly strange departure was taking place in almost perfect time with the bloodletting in Indiana. The coaching community was immediately shocked when Stephanie White, a highly regarded and extremely successful head coach, abruptly dissolved connections with the Connecticut Sun. Now, if you consider this only from a basketball standpoint, the choice is completely nonsensical. With a team full of seasoned veterans, formidable defenders, and players who fully embraced her tough, defensive-minded style of play, White had created an absolute powerhouse in Connecticut. They were a constant challenger for the championship, coming painfully close to winning it after several lengthy postseason campaigns. So why in the world would a coach abandon a superbly built, championship-ready team with top players like Duana Bonner and Alyssa Thomas? The explanation, which centers solely on the unparalleled spotlight brewing in the Midwest, is as clear-cut as it is cynical. Every shrewd executive in the league saw exactly what White did. She knew that winning a title in Connecticut would offer her a lovely trophy, but taking over as head coach of the Indiana Fever would bring her unprecedented media attention, international recognition, and the keys to the most lucrative kingdom in women's sports. Perfectly timed to escape the ugly growing pains that someone else had previously experienced, it was the ultimate parachute jump. After laying the foundation and enduring the harsh rookie initiation, everything was ready for someone new to enter and claim all the glory. It was a well-thought-out change that infuriated many ardent basketball purists and created the conditions for a huge ego clash. And just when you thought this blatant power play was over, a huge truth bomb was revealed on national television. After spending the whole summer fighting with his own co-workers over the obvious disregard for the rookie sensation, Stephen A. Smith took to the airwaves and totally destroyed the illusion. He validated what the most ardent grassroots supporters had always suspected. The old guard is completely disconnected from reality. Smith drew attention to the incredible hypocrisy of a league that pretended for a whole year that they didn't require this new attention, only to abruptly reorganize their entire power structure in order to gain some of it. He emphasized in particular how executives and coaches, including the new fever regime, are totally shut off from the supporters who created this enormous new economy. In a heated episode, he explained how the WNBA establishment allowed physical altercations on the court, ignored the poisonous narratives being spread by resentful veterans on podcasts, and spent months attempting to humiliate Clark. However, those same individuals intended to take the helm as soon as the season concluded and the league signed a huge new broadcast contract. Smith made it quite evident that the new leadership is attempting to control the narrative by presenting their senior expertise as the final piece of the puzzle when, in fact, their sole responsibility is to move aside. He didn't hold back when evaluating the blatant conceit needed to enter a scenario set up by a once-in-a-lifetime player and behave as though the coaching staff is the star of the show. His tirade exposed the entire effort as nothing more than a desperate attempt to stay relevant by those who had previously denigrated the exact phenomena that now pays their salaries. But even before he switched on his microphone, the anger was building. The fan base erupted as soon as the rumors of this planned change surfaced on social media, and the stark contrast between the front desk and ticket buyers became apparent. The new generation of fans, who have sold out arenas all across the nation, broken viewership records, and purchased every jersey ever made, are devoted to the player who brought them there. Throughout the summer, they closely observed every vicious foul, every insignificant post-game remark, and every effort at media gaslighting. They witnessed the rookie's initial treatment by the seasoned veterans and heritage coaches, perceiving her not as the savior of their financial environment but as an unwelcome interloper. Therefore, the supporters smelt a rat when they learned that a seasoned coach with strong ties to the league's old structure was abruptly leaving her top squad to take over the fever. Accusations that this was nothing more than a big, clout-chasing effort filled the forums and comment sections. Instead of looking for a creative, forward-thinking, offensive mind who could actually unleash the team's historic pace and space potential, fans openly questioned why the front office felt the need to bring in someone who symbolizes the old guard. The deep-seated perception that CEOs are treating the fan base like complete idiots is the source of the dissatisfaction. The executive staff thinks that by putting a reputable, well-known name on the head coaching door, the team will gain legitimacy in the eyes of basketball purists, disregarding the fact that the new fan base despises the old guard. It is a huge public relations blunder, demonstrating that the decision-makers in the boardroom are essentially disconnected from the consumers who purchase their goods. Additionally, this divergence reveals a darker aspect of the entire story. The envy storyline that characterized the entire 2024 season is finally confirmed by this entire coaching carousel, which validates every fan who was considered insane for bringing it up. Media defenders spent months trying to persuade the public that there was no hate, bitterness, or resentment toward the league's new face. The harsh hip checks, the exclusionary Olympic roster snubs, and the disparaging remarks from previous players, they said, were just typical competitive fire. However, that comforting fiction is entirely destroyed by the abrupt and brutal rush to land the head coaching position in Indiana. An established, well-respected coach like White would never leave a championship-caliber team to take over a squad that just made it to the first round of the playoffs if the debut season was really just business as usual. In actuality, everyone in the league is aware of who is in charge, and their ingrained jealousy has just turned into calculated opportunism. Despite their best attempts, they were unable to physically intimidate her, humiliate her on the court, or turn the media against her. Thus, the old guard's new tactic is quite straightforward. You have to figure out how to overtake the phenomenon if you can't defeat it. For a company that won't give up the wheel, it's the ultimate ego trip. When the team eventually goes far in the postseason, the veterans want to watch from the sidelines, cross their arms, and claim credit. They want the historical account to show that the championship potential was ultimately unlocked by their seasoned leadership, steady hand, and astute systemic modifications. It is an obvious attempt to take center stage and regain control of a player whose natural popularity worried the establishment from the start. However, when this ambitious scheme is carried out, it has become harder to overlook the real reason for the insanity. Ultimately, the desire of unparalleled corporate dominance and sheer, unadulterated financial greed are the driving forces behind every move made in this high-stakes chess battle. The league just struck a huge agreement worth billions of dollars for television rights, which fundamentally changed the sport's financial landscape. Everyone in the basketball world is aware of the exact face that sold that enormous bundle. The Indiana franchise has seen a financial windfall never witnessed in its history thanks to the local broadcast rights, the enormous corporate sponsorships, the sold-out season ticket packages, and the never-ending flood of retail purchases. Joining this particular squad is no longer merely a professional decision for a head coach or front office executive. It is the key to unrivaled leverage, impregnable job security, and generational wealth. Kelly Krauskopf's return to the Fever's front office as president of basketball operations and the harsh removal of the coaching staff that followed were a brilliant, if utterly brutal, move to manage this enormous revenue flow. The executives understood that if they did not move quickly, the players would take center stage and the organization would be entirely overshadowed. They fear a situation in which the athletes have all the power, set the terms, and the front office is reduced to mere spectators. The front office is frantically trying to create a firewall of authority by hiring a strong, seasoned head coach. Instead of seeing the organization as a wild traveling circus focused solely on one amazing player, they want to make sure that the broadcast networks and corporate sponsors see it as a classic, well-oiled operation operated by renowned veterans. They are obviously eager to burn any bridge and fire any devoted employee in order to grab the bag. It is a desperate attempt to corporatize a cultural phenomena that was wholly spontaneous. However, there is a huge impending risk associated with this high-wire act that could blow up in their faces. You must examine the significant psychological change occurring inside the fan base itself in order to fully understand how perilous this position is. These are not the obedient onlookers of the past who only gave courteous applause during essentially sound defensive rotations. This new generation of followers acts like a virtual army prepared to fight over any perceived offense against their celebrity, operating with a highly defensive mindset. Stephen A. Smith was expressing the rage of millions of individuals who feel that their intelligence is being disparaged when he ascended the stage and accused the establishment of being wholly out of touch. The fans view Stephanie White's return as an infiltration by the very establishment that attempted to stifle their favorite player, rather than as a victorious return home. They recall the podcast segments in which seasoned players mocked the notion of a rookie taking over. They recall the strange press conferences in which coaches denied the influence on the court. Deep mistrust is the first response when one of the most well-known members of the same coaching fraternity abruptly parachutes into Indianapolis to take charge. The fast-paced Logo 3 shooting style that made the squad so entertaining to watch in the second half of the season is something that the supporters are afraid the new coaching staff would try to curb. They fear that rigorous, institutional control will take precedence over individual genius under the old-school mindset, effectively placing a governor on a sports car to prove who is behind the wheel. This is a direct response to the league's arrogant attitude toward these new supporters during the past 12 months, not just an unfounded worry. And as the off-season continues, the pressure cooker just becomes hotter. This divergence has far-reaching effects that go well beyond the coaching staff. They target the core of the franchise's future organizational structure. Think about Kelsey Mitchell's contract predicament. Mitchell is a really talented veteran guard who played a significant role in the Fever's late-season push. Under the most intense scrutiny in the sport's history, the front office must now manage complicated salary cap dynamics, unrestricted free agency, and roster development. The supporters want the roster to be tailored to their point guard's generation. They are looking for athletes that can collect incredibly quick transition passes without fumbling the ball out of bounds, rim-running forwards, and knockout shooters. However, there is concern that an old guard businessman like Krauskopf and an old guard coach like White may try to assemble a traditional grit-and-grind group that totally overlooks the new pace and space reality. It will be the ultimate evidence that Stephen A. Smith was completely right if the front office chooses to hire older veterans who can demand the ball in the half-court over athletic floor spacers who can run the floor. It will demonstrate that the boardroom egos are more focused on doing things correctly, according to the WNBA rulebook, rather than doing things the greatest manner to maximize the generational skill they were handed. It is astounding how conceited it is to look at the sport's most potent offensive engine and declare, "We need to slow this down," even though this is precisely what the grassroots supporters are afraid would occur. And when you consider the historical precedents of how well-established sports leagues respond to uncontrollable disruption, this anxiety is quite warranted. The establishment's first response whenever a really disruptive force joins a professional sports league is to attempt to contain it. We witnessed it during the outset of the three-point revolution, when traditional coaches referred to it as a gimmick until it completely upended their defensive philosophies. The boardroom counterpart of the same defensive reaction is what we are currently seeing in Indiana. A phenomenon that is wild, unpredictable, and far more popular than the league itself is being controlled by executives and legacy coaches. Stephen A. Smith is the only person in sports journalism who truly knows the entertainment industry, which is why his fiery remarks struck such a chord. He understands that the audience are watching for magic rather than a masterfully performed flex offense. They want the spectacular assists, the deep threes, and the unmistakable swagger that totally defies convention. Smith warns the new leadership that they are playing with fire when he refers to them as being out of touch. They will alienate the large audience that just saved their league from financial irrelevance if they attempt to sanitize the product or force the star to follow their antiquated notions of how an offense should be conducted or how a rookie should behave. It is astounding how bold the front office is to believe they can oversee a cultural revolution. Additionally, it prepares for what will surely be the most closely watched training camp in female athletics history. Furthermore, failure has utterly disastrous repercussions. The Indiana Fever are left on extremely thin ice as this historic power play eventually comes to an end. Their brutal takeover of the boardroom has been carried out successfully. They have successfully made room for the glamorous, well-known hiring who can stand in front of the cameras and bask in the glory by firing the blue-collar coach who took all the bullets and did all the dirty labor. However, by doing this, they have put a billboard-sized bullseye on their own backs. Stephen A. Smith's scathing affirmation that these decision-makers are out of touch is a dire, foreboding warning rather than merely a daily hot take in the sports debate. Every action is being observed by the fans with harsh, unrelenting skepticism. They will not be readily duped by slick corporate PR rhetoric because they are fully aware of the reasons behind this coaching change. If the new government intervenes and attempts to impose a strict old